Aitah for cutting off my brother and sister-in-law after my husband and I made our pregnancy announcement. I, 27F, and my husband, 41M, are expecting our first child. We got married in August and found out we were expecting a few days before the wedding. This is our first child and we're excited to share this with our family when the time was right. Since my family is kind of scattered around the country, we decided to send a message to the family group chat. My brother, 37M, and SIL, 30F, took it upon themselves to be very passive-aggressive and make it about themselves. For a little backstory, my fiancé and I are off-the-record truckers. My parents live in WI and my brother and SIL live in FL. We know he's miserable down there and is only there because of his wife's baby daddy issues up north. But because of this, they expect everyone to cater to them, that is to say, go down to visit them, call them, have the world revolve around them. Because of money issues, my brother couldn't even make it to our wedding after 6 months of talking like he would, only to cancel a week before. This caused a rift between him and my dad. But as far as hubby and I were concerned, it wasn't a big deal. It was sad, but we weren't going to hold it against him. When my father confronted him, my sil spoke up and said, "We're doing what's best for our family. This is understandable." And we didn't push, mainly because we had a lot of other things on our mind for the wedding. But this didn't stop my brother from calling us every chance he got to complain about his problems with my father. Fast forward a month after our wedding and everything was great. My husband and I were in marital bliss. I was 11 weeks along. And we decided to spill the beans to our close loved ones. We were beyond excited for this new journey ahead. My husband typed out the message and hit send as we waited with anticipation for our family's reaction. My sister, 35F, wrote about how she had a hunch and how happy she was for us. And my other brother, 36M, made a joke about whether or not he should be called Aunt or Uncle Joe, depending on if it were a boy or girl. Keep in mind this took the span of about 30 minutes, so it wasn't a fast chat. Finally, my brother in FL responded with congrats. I bet Dad is excited. And his wife completely ignored the message and decided to respond to my brother Joe saying, "Lol, you're already an uncle to our boys in FL," completely bypassing the announcement altogether. I know this could sound very petty on my end, but for years prior I had been an amazing sister-in-law and aunt to their kids. She had 2 boys from 2 different men when she had married my brother, and I treated them like they were my blood nephews. I stood up for this woman when her and my dad would get into spats. I spent hours on the phone consoling both of them 2 years prior during their own wedding when my sister tried to sabotage it, which is a whole other crazy story within itself. I even took it upon myself to do maid of honor duties when I wasn't the MOH. Her mother was. When they had their first child together about a year before, they posted about him constantly in the group chat. Not once a day or even twice, but sometimes even 10 plus. All while ignoring other people and all but making it into their baby's GC instead of a family one. I get being excited, but they were going overboard. But what made me even more irritated was they acted like her first 2 boys, who were only 8 and 6 at the time, didn't even exist. But yet I still played my part, liked photos, and sometimes commented because I knew this was a big deal for them. To top it off, she's currently pregnant with their second biological kid and first girl, which, despite what happened, I'm excited for them from a distance. She's about 2 months further along than me. She's due in February and I'm due in April. Originally, I was excited that my baby would have a cousin so close in age, but I've recently realized they look at my unborn baby as more of a competitor for their kids than a family member. My other brother doesn't have kids and my sister's son is 11 years old. I know that sounds harsh, but with how they're acting and the fact that we live so much closer to our parents in WI, I think they believe we somehow stole their spotlight. However, that isn't what made me go over the edge. It was the lack of response. And in that moment when I saw she completely ignored our message when a simple congratulations would have sufficed, I came unglued. My brother's response was one thing, and the fact that he took it upon himself to make our moment about his beef with our dad, topped with a half a *** congrats, showed me enough, but I'd expected more from my SIL, and I think that's what hurt the most. We were close before all of this, and that's what made it so surreal that I had been spending the last 5 years catering to someone who didn't even have the common courtesy to type out a single message, but instead went out of her way to reply to someone else and make it about her own kids, and I told her as much. I crossed a line in the GC that no one was expecting, and admittedly, while I regret my choice of harsh words, I meant the meaning behind them. To be frank, I called them both self-centered cats who couldn't be happy for anyone else. I basically said what everyone else had been thinking for years but didn't want to say in fear of rocking the boat. I told them they needed some humility, and how I'd been pandering to them for years when it came to their new son. Yet they were too selfish to even simply congratulate us on our baby. Our win isn't your loss! I went all out first to plead. Knowing this was the last straw with zero expectations of even having the same relationship with them again, I was done, and I hoped this would maybe make them appreciate people more in the future. It was like I came to a ledge and freely decided to jump off of it, knowing there was no way I could go back and being satisfied with that decision. Mind you, I had come close to cutting my brother off many times in the past. The most recent time was when he made racist comments about my Filipina mom acting like it was a joke. This woman raised him like her own, along with my older sister and brother, in a country she was new to, and my oldest brother had the gall to even hint at being mean. We all have the same dad, but they all share the same mom. Needless to say, I put him in his place about that. Another time I had worked for him and he was prioritizing paying his friends before me. Sometimes I even had to remind him. Once I waited until he remembered, and it took 4 days. This was when I was truck driving solo. But his wife had always been in my corner, or at the very least a mediator. She had my back in most instances, calling my brother out on his BS and being supportive. I was even there for her when she needed an ear and shoulder to cry on when she suspected infidelity early on in their marriage. It felt very 50/50. Until I realized it was only that way for things she didn't feel threatened by. Even for my wedding, she didn't ask about it or talk about it, and on the morning of, I was met with a message that said, "I hope your day is perfect." But other than that, nothing, and I had considered this woman closer than my actual sister at one point. So I cut them off after that. I removed myself from the group chat, blocked them out of my head, and focused on my new life as a wife and an expecting mother. I didn't dwell on them, and after I calmed down, I didn't even have ill will towards them. I didn't think about them. I hoped their daughter was born happy and healthy, and I'd cheer for them from my table, not at a shared one. After showing their true colors, I no longer felt the need to have people like that in our lives. If you can take a moment like that and make it about yourselves, what else are you willing to do? And I wasn't willing. I am not willing to have people like them as active parts of my child's life, even though it does suck that he won't really have my brother in his life. It will be worth it in the long run. I don't make this decision lightly. To be honest, I've backslid with them more times than I can count or remember, but it isn't just me anymore. My only job is to protect my child, and I refuse to have so-called loving family members use him in their own twisted game of envy or whatever it is they've got going on. I know what it's like being compared to other people or being pitted against cousins and other kids, and that'll be the last thing I'll ever allow to happen to my kid. My brother and Sil can stay in their little part of the world, acting as if everybody else's lives revolve around them, but I'm not entertaining it anymore, and this time for good. Like I said, I wish them the best, I hope their daughter is healthy, but we can be civil from a distance. At this point, that's their choice. I've already made mine. After about 2 months, my SIL messages me privately. At this point, I had removed them both from socials. The smallest part of me, the size of the tiniest grain of sand, that was expecting her to be a decent human and admit to her wrongdoings, was quickly dashed away when she started to give me a guilt trip and sob story, almost gaslighting me into thinking I owed her an apology. I quickly brushed any hopeful feelings aside and laughed at how ridiculous the fleeting thought had been as she went on about how she got the end of the stick and how I didn't give her time to say anything before I blew up. But the most ridiculous point she tried to advocate for was how she just wants us to be how we were before, as if... The conversation was relatively short because I didn't want to entertain her longer than I had to, but I made it very clear that the bridge had already been burned. I don't hold any hatred for them. I hope their baby is healthy and I want them to have a good life without us in it. I also expressed that even though she felt like she was getting the end of the stick, I refused to allow my child to ever feel like that, by inviting people into his life that only have their best interests in mind. She refused to take this as an answer and kept digging herself into a deeper hole. The way that I looked at it was either she could accept my feelings about the situation and move on, keeping everything as civil as possible, or she could continue to push and force me to have hard feelings once again. She was choosing the latter. Fortunately, before it got that far, I ended the conversation and moved on with my life. I don't know if she's lashing out because she's used to getting what she wants. She's attractive, only child, and adopted by 2 people who made her the apple of their eye. Or because she was honestly sidetracked with my reaction and didn't consider that anybody would have the audacity to finally stand up to their bullying ways. Maybe both. But either way, I'm very content with my decision. And while I don't take it lightly, it needed to be done. If not now, then down the road. And I'm grateful that I had the chance to stop it in its tracks early. Maybe this will teach them that they shouldn't treat people like who go out of their way for them, and I can be used as an example of that. It sucks that I had to cut off my brother and his family, but I have my own to worry about now. And I'm not apologizing about that, so they can throw whatever temper tantrums that they want, but it's not my problem. I will remain civil if I see them at family gatherings, but I won't go out of my way to give them updates on anything, and I don't expect that from them either. I'm a big believer that you can choose your family, and blood doesn't mean anything unless you're willing to act like it does. Trust, love, and loyalty is earned. It isn't a given freely, and I finally had enough. I have friends that I grew up with who live across the country, who are willing to fly over just for a baby shower, yet she couldn't even take 3 seconds to type congratulations. It's the principle of it. My brother has expressed to my husband that he sees my point of view and his wife's point of view, but as far as I'm concerned, that's moot. It's not a war. It's hardly even a battle anymore. If they haven't moved on, then that just means that there's not enough going on in their lives apparently, and if they choose to keep me living in their head rent-free, maybe they should think about the harsh words that I called them in a moment of anger and take into consideration that there was probably a seed of truth in that. I know that'll probably not be the case. But that's the only gift that I can give them, as I move on with my life and look forward to raising my baby. Something that I have been looking forward to basically my entire life. Motherhood. I won't let them take that away from me. I do have her messages as receipts, if anybody is interested, but I'm not sure if I can get the original ones from the family group chat considering I removed myself from it. The moral of the story is, be careful what you prioritize in your life, and act accordingly when it comes to who you allow in your family's life. So, AITA?